Well, welcome to our, boy, this is the halfway point. This is week 6. Hey, guys. That was fast. Are you starting to feel autumn?
The second or third session.
I know. Are you starting to feel autumn in the air a little bit of crispiness in it? Feel good? A little moisture on the ground? Oh, man, that was wonderful. I guess as a kid, I liked the summer a whole lot. Much less so now. Is it just me? Give me autumn, give me winter. I'm good to go. Anyway, if we have anybody, I know we have somebody new. Jason in the back there contacted me today and said, "Hey, you guys still open?" I said, "Well, I don't know." So Jason came tonight, and I thank you for that. You were talking to Jeremy Johnson, was that right? And he mentioned the class.
Bible study this morning, Starbucks.
Yeah. Oh, Jeremy's a great guy. I hope all of you know Jeremy. He's just a wonderful person. I went to school with his mom and dad, so that goes way back. Neat parents that he's got, too. Super nice people. So we welcome Jason. Anybody else new that hasn't been here previous? You guys look pretty familiar to me. Appreciate all the snacks. We got all the snacks filled in for the 12 weeks, so thank you all so much. Tonight it was Maureen and Rob bringing all sorts of good things. I heard some ooh as people were eating over there, so please go back. Maureen and Rob are over there. So thank you guys.
You need deviled eggs?
I wanted to report on something, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tracy to do some introductory remarks, and I'm going to do something in a few minutes. Steve's not here tonight because he and I are like tag teaming up at a church at Fallbrook, and so he may have mentioned that last week. That's why I wasn't here. And guess what? This is a small church. It's not a huge church. It's downtown, kind of the old section of Fallbrook, and I always have a good attitude. I don't care if it's 3 people or whatever. So I come there, and they're starting to set stuff up, and they got like 3 tables out, and I thought, okay, it's going to be a pretty intimate bunch, 3 tables worth of people. And I wasn't really paying attention. I was doing other things, and I looked. Next time I looked, because we're getting ready, there were like 4 or 5 tables set up. By the time we got going on this thing, and I asked them after, there's 65 people there. This is a small church, and so it's just fun to see somebody struck the match, and it's it's starting to go someplace else. For Larry, they did a 6-part series at their church in Valley Center. And so it's just nice to see this confidence builder for Christians as well as challenges to non-Christians going on all through the county.
Is that a Baptist church up there?
It used to be. It was Fallbrook First Baptist. Now it's called Life Point.
Oh, okay.
But if you look at the website, it's...
I was at the Baptist church in Spokane. Yes, that is small.
It is small.
Isn't there somebody there that used to be on the elder board?
Yeah, Brian Dingus.
Brian Dingus. Yes.
Super nice guy.
Yes.
Oh, really wonderful guy. Big smile on his. He was really happy last week. So I told Steve, I emailed him before this evening. I said, "You're going to have a ball up there. I hope it turns out real well." And so I think he'll have a good time. So he'll report back next week, I'm sure, to let you know what went on. So that's my spiel. Really excited to see something happening in other churches as well. So Tracy was nice enough to come on up and share something with you for the first 10 or 15 minutes because we try to jam in a lot of material here in the class. I hope it doesn't feel like you're getting overwhelmed, but I appreciate Tracy coming up here to talk to you.
Thank you. Okay. How many of you are members of the EFCC Apologetics Facebook page? Okay, a few hands. For those of you that do Facebook, I would recommend joining up on our page so that you can kind of keep up to date on anything that we've got going on, any announcements. And also people post some good, interesting material as well. And one of our longtime members, Nathan Apodaca, happened to post something the other day that I thought bore a little closer examination. What he posted was something from J. Warner Wallace, whom most of us are familiar with, Cold Case Christianity. And what he posted on was a topic called The Reasonable Expectations That Cause Mythologies to Resemble Jesus. Actually, the post came from a site called The Poached Egg, who was pulling some stuff off of J. Warner Wallace's content. So what this is about you may have often heard how atheists, for example, will say, well, Jesus was just a myth. Or at least he might have existed as a real person. There might have been a real person named Jesus, but, the miraculous birth, the miracles that he did, well, that's just all mythology picked up from earlier myths. And there usually isn't a whole lot of truth to that once you start digging into it, but sometimes you might see some actual commonalities of similar kinds of things that have happened first. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the accounts of Jesus came from that. We could reasonably say that as people started looking at the universe and wondering, where did this all come from? Romans 1 tells us how God kind of placed an innate knowledge of himself in our hearts from the very beginning. And so with that knowledge, with that understanding, even if we did not have a single word of Scripture, what kinds of things would you reasonably expect to be true if there is a creator God? I'm going to toss it out there for a second. What do you think? What are some things that we would expect from God if he created us and the world? Order, natural order of things. A
conscience.
A conscience, a sense of built-in morality. Yeah. So he came up with a list of about 8 of them. A reasonable expectations, a creator God would be incredibly strong and likely emerge in our world in a way that defies the natural order of things. If this creator God can create the universe, he's got some power. A creator God would have the power to perform miracles and control the forces of the natural environment. A God that's powerful enough to create the universe and the laws that run it would have the power to suspend those laws whenever he chooses for his own purposes. A creator God, if he wanted us to know him, would likely provide us with some form of mediator. Here's my representative to go forth and tell you about me. A creator God, if he was to come to earth, would certainly draw attention to himself, gathering disciples. A creator God would be powerful enough to defeat death. A creator God would want to save his children and come to their rescue, particularly if they're facing an eternal threat. A creator God, if he loves us, would likely make it possible for us to join him in his eternal life. And a creator God would likely have infinite wisdom and be the master of our lives. So I think all of these are reasonable things to expect of a God that has created us and our world. And so we could expect that as myths developed over the centuries, that the gods that people invent would have a lot of these common traits. So it's not a big shock and surprise that we might see a little commonality between some of these myths and Jesus, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's where the accounts and qualities of Jesus came from. But even then, a lot of times people will, if they're biased or they're looking for ways to discount Christianity, they will say, well, here's this other myth, and it's got so many parallels. It's obvious to see where the story of Jesus came from. One of the ones I run across fairly often is the Egyptian god Horus. And we see lots of claims that parallel Jesus. For example, the claim Horus was born in a cave, his birth was announced by an angel, heralded by a star, and attended by shepherds. The truth? There's no reference to a cave or a manger in the Egyptian birth story of Horus. In fact, none of the details are present in the ancient Egyptian stories of Horus. He was born in a swamp. His birth was not heralded by an angel. There was no star. Or the claim? Horus attended a special rite of passage at the age of 12, and there was no data on the child from the age of 12 to 30. The truth of the matter, there's no continuous effort in the Horus mythology to account for all these years. So there are no real gaps in the chronology. Horus never taught in any temple at 12, like Jesus did. Horus was baptized in a river at the age of 30, and his baptizer was later beheaded. Truth? Horus was never baptized, while conspiracy theorists often point to Anup the baptizer, claiming he was later beheaded. There is no such person in Horus's story. Claim Horus had 12 disciples. Truth? Horus had only 4 disciples, but at some point in the story there is reference to 16 followers and a group of unnumbered followers who joined Horus in battle. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that. A claim, Horus performed miracles, exorcised demons, raised someone from the dead, walked on water. Again, the truth of the matter. Horus certainly performed miracles. After all, he is described as a god. But there's no real mention of exorcising demons, raising people from the dead, or walking on water. Let's see, do I have more? So we can see there are a lot of claims made about these so-called gods and these myths that parallel Christianity, but the parallels are really just kind of invented after the fact. Once you do some actual homework, all these internet pundits are quick to toss this stuff out, but as soon as you do some real homework, you're going to find out it's just not true. Now, here is the real knockdown killer argument, even without having to do any homework whatsoever. We know in the history of Israel, they had a lot of episodes where they were flirting with other gods, all the way from Moses through Joshua and forward. And there was a cycle where they would flirt with these other gods, God would hammer them and bring on an oppressor, and they would cry out to God, God, save us. And God would raise someone up, maybe a judge, who would save them. And once everything was back to normal, okay, we're going to start flirting with other gods again. And they never seemed to learn their lesson until they were taken into captivity and spent decades in exile. From that point forward, they finally learned their lesson. And from that point on, they never messed around with anyone else's gods. In fact, they swung in the exact opposite direction. They said, our God, Yahweh, is the only God. None else matters. To the point where if anyone tried to introduce any outside influences, it was met with violence. For example, the revolt of the Maccabees. There was an attempt to try to bring in the influence of Greek gods into their system of worship. And over a 7-year period, they executed guerrilla warfare and fought against those who were trying to introduce these outside influences. And so a first century Jew or Christian, the last thing they would do would be to adopt any kind of myth or belief from anyone else's pantheon. It's just something they would not have done. And right then and there, that just wipes out any credibility that they say, oh yeah, they borrowed from this myth, they borrowed from that myth. No, we have historical records that is the very last thing they would have done. And so we can be very confident that the accounts that we have of Jesus come straight from Scripture, and they are not influenced by anybody else's spiritual beliefs. Okay. So let me open in prayer before Gary comes up. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the opportunity to come tonight and learn more about you, about your word, and pray that you will speak to us through Gary as he shares about all the reasons that the Bible is not only a source of wisdom, a word from you, but also that it has value to those that don't even believe. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you. Hey, Jim, I don't think we have your email correct because yours are bouncing back. If you guys have a second at the end of class, can you just give me the email again? Because you're not getting ours, I don't think, are you? Okay. The reason why I mentioned that is I sent everybody an outline, I think yesterday, but I got some spare copies. Should I send it around? Are there some people that would like a copy? Okay, a couple back there. Maybe just Louise, you mind just? And then, yeah, Jim and Charlene back there. Thanks. And I'm adding another book over here that you can take and read and keep or bring it back. We'll circulate it. It's a title that I always stumble over. It's The Questions Christians Hope No One Will Ask. But it's an interesting title, isn't it? I mean, look at, they have like little post-it notes on the front. So here's some of the questions that, and this guy's a good author, Mark Middleburg. Here's some of the questions that he says Christians go, they don't really want to answer. How could a good God allow so much suffering? Well, that's always the number one issue. Why should I believe heaven and hell exist? Why do you condemn homosexuals? Why are Christians so judgmental? Why trust the Bible? It's full of myths. That's just what Tracy was talking about. Sure, Jesus was a good man. Why make him into the Son of God, too? Didn't evolution put God out of a job? Why are Christians so obsessed with abortion? What makes you so sure God even exists? Christians are hypocrites, so why should I listen to you? So remind me, I'll just leave it up here for now, but I'll put it over there afterwards. So it's yours. We picked it up somewhere. I don't even remember where. It's clean and nobody's marked in it or anything. So good news on that. I'm getting over a cold, and Sharon's in the middle of it, so we're like trading. And so that's why she's not here tonight. And so I miss her a whole lot, but that's all right. We'll be okay. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, we're having to use something a little different. Usually I use my computer. So I think it's a technological black thumb. Is there such a thing as that? Whatever it is, I've got it. So I show up and plug everything in, and Alan's going, it just doesn't work tonight. So anyway, we're working off a computer in the back, thank goodness. But is it contagious? Okay. Well, don't get near me because yeah. Anyway, so there were a couple of videos I was going to have you take a look at, but so we're going to skip over that tonight. But you can find them on YouTube if you care. It was 2 songs, and so we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. So Tracy already told you what we want to talk about tonight. Well, let's start with surveys. I think surveys are kind of interesting, just some of the things that get revealed. Probably interesting is not the right word. It's probably depressing is more like it. Only half of U.S. adults could name even one of the 4 Gospels. Now, this is a country that on the coin says, in God we trust, and the dollar bills, in God we trust, and people want the 10 Commandments out. And, well, they talk a good talk. The catch is people don't necessarily know anything about the Bible. I think we mentioned that we talked about that before, that we were kind of in a biblically illiterate society. It didn't used to be that way.
What was the structure of the survey? I mean, how did they pick on where?
I don't know. You're right, because sometimes, depending how the question's asked and who they've picked, it can alter the results. But I'm not surprised at some of these findings. Fewer than half the adults can name the first book of the Bible. Yeah, that's a real tricky one, huh? Only 1 in 3 knew who spoke the Sermon on the Mount. I'll tell you, I was surprised. I didn't think it'd be that high. I guess I'm a pessimist, but this is fun. I mean, the internet is a time sink, isn't it? I mean, I'll get on there and it's like 20 minutes later, well, I'm almost done. 30 minutes later, I'm down the wormhole, So they had something on there that I came across, supposedly, now you never know, but supposedly people thought it was funny. They had Bible classes for little kids, and when the kids would make funny comments, they'd turn it in and they'd collect these things. So I don't know. don't assume it's really true, but it's funny as can be. So these are supposed to be kids' remarks when they were in their classes talking about the Bible or writing out comments. Did you know Noah's wife was Joan of Arc? Samson slayed the Philistines with the axe of the apostles. Yeah, watch out. That's sharp. Solomon had 300 wives and 700 porcupines. Either it's really, really kinky or it's just, or, he's just an animal lover. I don't know, but I mean, yeah, 700 porcupines. Why would you need more than 3 or 4 porcupines? Those who followed Jesus were called the 12 decibels. Kind of a quiet bunch, I guess. And then the epistles were the wives of the apostles. I don't know, that one kind of makes sense to me. It sounds the same. Why not? Okay, so might as well laugh about it, but we're in a society that doesn't think much of the Bible. So what's our problem? Our problem is that people just aren't reading the Bible like they used to. Now, Christians do. So I'm not talking about Christians. I'm talking about that dark world out there that has given up on the Bible. Mainly, they don't care. They don't want to hear about God again. They don't want to hear about theology. Oh, don't you want to learn about sin and redemption? No, thanks. It's an ancient book. Don't have any desire. Don't care. So our problem is going to be we have to come up with some reasons if we're going to talk to non-Christians. These are not our reasons, but I'm saying if you're talking to a non-Christian and if you hunger for God, that person may not hunger for God. So how do you get them into the Bible and say, here, you ought to read it? They're going to go, the Bible? That's Sunday morning. That's sermons. That's no thanks. And so somehow we've got to say, yeah, but there are other reasons. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. This is not going to be really directed to the Christian, but it's directed to you if you want to talk to non-Christians to get them maybe curious about the Bible and say, I never thought about that before. Maybe I should be reading it. So that's what we're going to focus on tonight. And we're going to do 6 reasons. One is, it is just simply a book of wonderful stories. Everybody thinks the Bible's full of sermons, right? The first thing they think of is, oh, man, I don't want to sit there and read sermons. The sermons are about that much of the Bible. Most of it is stories. Everybody loves a good story. Nobody ever outgrows that. It's got a lot of worldly wisdom, just how to get by in life. And I'm not talking about Christian wisdom. I'm just saying solid things to get you through life. It's a source of a lot of literary inspirations. I handed out to some of you before we started tonight a little portion of a poem. And so we're going to actually have some poem readings tonight. Aren't you glad you came? No, don't run for it. Lock the doors. Lock the door. So we're going to do a little bit of Psalms and Isaiah tonight. Number 4, how about artistic inspirations? I mean, already I bet in your head you can picture famous paintings, sculptures that have been done based on the Bible, because it was an inspiration to say, wow, I'd like to see that in a 3-dimensional piece of marble. What would that look like? And there are a lot of those famous things. And then number 5, the impact on our language. Just the things we say, the famous speeches from some of our best orators have come right from the Bible. So we're going to hear in a little while from Martin Luther King. And anyway, so we'll get to that. And then number 6, when I used to teach the Bible as lit out at Palomar, those classes were optional classes, those lit classes. They had to take the comp classes, so you knew you were going to get a full class for that. But you never knew if you were going to make it on your lit classes, so you'd have to go around and scare up some interest. So the other teachers are always nice. I'd say, can I come in and talk to your students for a couple of minutes? Oh, yeah. So I'd come in. You know what I'd hit them with? I'd hit them with number 6 up here. I wouldn't do the other 5 just because I didn't have the time. And I think it's harder to make a case for the other 5. So I hit them with number 6. I said, do you want to learn about and find out about the most important book that's ever been in the Western world? Now, the West means like Europe and over here to America. I said, the Bible is it. You can forget Moby Dick. You can forget Nathaniel Hawthorne. I don't mean forget them, but they're not in the running. Shakespeare, okay, but not in the running. The number 1 book. And we're going to talk about what some other people have said, so it's not just me. Again and again, they say this is the book that made the Western world. For good or for ill. Some people don't like the Western world. Yeah, but you ought to know what it is. And so we talk about the Bible as the most important book, Cornerstone book.
Basis for government.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the points. Sure. No, that's fine, John. That's good. I'm glad you're tracking with what we're talking about. So let's start off. Let's think about the area of just good stories, good literature, good reading in general that's in the Bible. And I said before, one of the most important things are the story elements. It surprises people. They think the Bible's full of dry recitations. It's not. It's got people in conflict. It's got people in love. It's got people that cheat on each other. It's got death. It's got all these things that are really powerful that never go away. So I'm just curious, what are some of your favorite stories? I'm going to share mine in a minute, but I wanted to hear from you. What are the stories you think of and you've gone to again and again, or you love it whenever they try to do a visualization, or you look at it and you go, oh, that's not exactly the way I picture it. What are some of the ones that come out for you? Jason?
Hezekiah and his prayer when Israel was going to fight the Syrians, and I can't remember the king's name.
Sennacherib? Yeah.
And he sent the messenger to pretty much said, "Where's your God?" And he said, "Well, here's my God right here." And prayed. I know there's like a certain form of prayer that he did, just like in Nehemiah, but he prayed that prayer and just wiped all these Syrians out. 185,000 Syrians. And that's.
You guys are going to think this is a plant, but we're going to do a poem tonight that's based off of the story that he just talked about. But it's a powerful story. You know, if you read Isaiah, the first part is a bunch of poems, and then right in the middle of Isaiah, have you ever noticed that? It goes to the story part of Isaiah, which is the invasion of Sennacherib, and they come up to the city gates of Jerusalem. They look up and they say, "You guys are toast." And they're not. It's the Assyrian army that's toast. And then Isaiah goes back to poetry again. It's kind of an odd way the book is set up. So it goes poetry and then the story part and then the poetry again. But yeah, that's a powerful story. Just read it sometime. Listen to the site. In fact, we talked about this several weeks back, and we were running through the Bible kind of quickly, and I just said, look at the part where Sennacherib's envoys come, and they start talking to the Hezekiah and his people on the ramparts there, and it's interesting. There's real psychological warfare that's going on. So that's a great story. What else, Larry?
I like Ruth.
Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about that one tonight. This is amazing story. You think there was a God working all this out? Yeah.
I love Esther.
Oh, that's a great story.
It reminds me of what's happening in the world even today.
Yeah. I mean, the whole book of Esther based on two things. Guys want wealth or guys are judged on their wealth and their power. Women are judged on their beauty. Gee, things haven't changed for thousands of years. You know, it's the same thing going on today. Yeah.
Joshua and his rather unconventional war tactics.
Yeah. I love that one. I got a picture of this that I'll share with you in a couple of minutes. Trace?
I like the story of Jonah. A lot of people think that it's about Jonah being in the belly of the whale. And I think the more important thing is about a whole city turning and repenting as a result of one man.
Yeah. Can we add one word? It's one reluctant man.
Yes.
He's kind of the nonprofit, you know. I mean, if you talk about being a nonprofit organization, he's a nonprofit. He doesn't want to go there. It's like, okay, Nineveh's there, I'll go this way. And then he sits there waiting for God to wipe out the city because he gives such a crummy speech. He's no Billy Graham. He says, repent or die, bye. And he's done. And he sits there just waiting because he knows that's not going to convince anybody. And then God redeems that place. And he's going, why are you doing that? God says, why are you upset? I've just saved hundreds of thousands of people. Michael?
I like the episode story in the Old Testament of King David's Special Forces bodyguard.
Where he wants a drink? That one? Or?
Well, it's interspersed in his life, but his name is Abishai.
Okay.
The bodyguard part is late in David's life. He was at war. He was fighting. He got tired. This big giant was almost going to kill him. And Abishai comes out and kills the enemy. Oh,
okay. You know what? Yeah, that's a good story. The one I was thinking of was David just laments that he really wishes he had some water from this well or something. Do you remember that one? And so his tough guys go out and they just hack their way through and they bring him the water. And he goes, I didn't want you to do that. And he just pours the water out as an offering to God. Yeah. Aren't there some good stories, though, in the Bible? You have one?
I like the story about Isaac and Rebekah and their children, Jacob and Esau, and how
the con job.
she takes things into her own hand.
Yeah.
Of course, she messed it up, and then when she took things into her own hands, trying to put Jacob in Esau's place so he would get the birthright.
Yeah, he'd get that blessing from. Yeah, that's a good one. Mike?
Joseph's brothers.
Oh, yeah. What a story. I mean, that's just like this. He starts off okay, he's a beloved guy, and then crash, he goes into the well or whatever, and he's sold into slavery, and he kind of works his way out of that, and crash, Potiphar's wife accuses him, and he's back in the hole again, and to pull himself out of that. I always love the suspense in that story because, toward the end of the story, he sees his brothers there. He can do anything he wants to those brothers, and he kind of fools with them in a way, and it's, that's a neat story. Well, I just put some of them up there. The Adam and Eve story, I mean, that's pretty powerful. And to have everything possible to walk with God and to blow it all, and it's just, it kind of hurts your heart because we're still living in the aftermath of like an earthquake. It ruined nature and it ruined us. It ruined our relationship with God. And then the Joseph story. How about the Moses and the Ten Commandments? You got to have Charlton Heston. I mean, who else is Moses? We'll get to heaven. He'll probably look like Charlton Heston, right? Say that was good typecast there. But isn't that a great story? To go up against the premier #1 nation in the world and say, "Let my people go," and to see that conflict of cultures and the snakes. The other guys can do the snake act as well, and that's an amazing story. All those different plagues. The Joshua story. I guess it was because I was a kid. Maybe it's just boys or something, but just the idea of that many walls and things coming down just really appeals to guys. Then you're talking about, I think, the psychological stuff of that too, that they march around but they don't do anything. Can you imagine your guys up there on the parapets, you're ready to go, and you're kind of flexing and grabbing your spear, and then they don't attack you, and then they go back. And you go, well, they'll be here tomorrow. Yeah, they are, and you're getting ready, and they don't do anything. They go, well, nothing's going to ever happen. And there go the walls.
Imagine as Joshua is giving out his battle plan. So we're going to just march around and then what?
Yeah, and then go back. Oh, this is a really tragic story. Here's a guy that was dedicated to God. He had all these benefits. God was going to bless him mightily. And he starts fooling around, gets his hands burned over and over again, never learns. And he says stupid things, and he kills, and he's just a master of destruction. And finally, just everything collapses, although he takes out his enemies with him. But I mean, the guy had so much potential. I just think that's kind of a grim story. Then the David and Goliath story. Yeah, isn't that good? Again, being a kid, I love that story. It's like, yeah, everybody looked like giants to me, and when I was a kid, just sling that thing around, let them go.
Goliath was a little lean there.
Yeah, a little lean. And of course, the best story of all is the Jesus story. I always thought, isn't there a new movie out? Not new, but it's maybe a year or two old called Risen. Have you seen that one? It's from the Roman perspective, and they thought, well, we took care of Jesus, everything's fine. All of a sudden, they're hearing these stories, and it doesn't seem to be going away. And so they appoint one guy, go take care of this. Find that corpse, bring it back, and reveal and say, what are you talking about? We've got him. He's right here. And so it's this guy's procedure trying to figure out what really happened. And he's introduced to the reality of Jesus as the movie goes along. It's not a Christian movie, but as I remember it, I don't think there's anything bad about it.
No.
But yeah, it seemed pretty accurate.
Is it a documentary?
No, it's Ralph Fiennes. Is that how? Oh, Joseph Fiennes? Okay.
One of the interesting points is he was the guard that had the spear of Jesus.
Oh, I'd forgotten that.
So he's on the horse, he's right there looking at Jesus' face. And then a few days later, the guy searching for the body. He walks into this room and Jesus is standing there.
Yeah.
He's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Very dramatic spot.
Yeah. That's a powerful story. Well, okay, that was the story end of good reading, but there's just tons of good poetry. After the stories, the second most popular type of literature in the Bible are poems. And I always feel bad, again, when I have taught a class on the Bible. I always ask people, why don't we value poetry like we used to? And so I'm not going to spend the time tonight, but back in the 1800s, if a famous poet came to town, he was the rock star, or she was the rock star of that time period. Everybody went. They wanted to go see this. And we lost that. Everybody knew Tennyson, everybody knew Wordsworth, and everybody knew Longfellow, and everybody knew all these great poets. Not now. Can you name the poet laureate of the United States? No, nobody knows that. Or the poet laureate of England. It used to be Wordsworth and people like that, but nobody knows that anymore. It's gone. Do you ever see newspapers that put poetry as like a little section of the newspaper? No. It's just filling up with more comics because that's what people can handle these days. Hey, that's pretty neat. So poetry's disappeared. All right, well, if that's okay, poetry's meant to be said aloud rather than we always just read it and go, that's nice. So I sent a little bunch of clippings around, and somebody, Monica, has the 23rd Psalm. Can you read that, Monica?
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me to still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness, for his name is seen. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The light, your path, you prepare a table for you in the presence of the enemy. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
That has given so much comfort over so many years. And just that opening line, the Lord is my shepherd. Talk about feeling taken care of at that point. It's actually not very complimentary to the human race, is it? Because that means we're sheep. And we lived in the high desert near sheep. And boy, are they dumb. And they'll drown in a little bit of water. They'll fall over, things that you go, why did you fall over that? And it's just, every day we'd go out there, I'd go running in the area, and there'd be a dead sheep lying there. It's like, they can't, they couldn't take care of themselves at all. So having somebody to watch over us feels really, really good. I think we all need that one. I forgot where Psalm 1 went. I don't remember. Maureen's got Psalm 1.
Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted streams of water, that yields its fruit in its season.
In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish.
Every time there's been any collection of the Psalms, that's always the first Psalm. It's not just kind of random. When the Hebrews put it together and the Christians looked at it and all, it's always the first one. Can you see how that becomes kind of a foundational piece for the rest of the Psalms? What is it basically introducing there? The good and the bad. The righteous person does this, the non-righteous does that. And it does it in really nice imagery about, like a tree planted by water. I mean, you think about being in the desert and what that would be like, the richness of that, and how we all feel when we're around a tree. If you've got a nice tree in the backyard in the summer, it feels good to sit under. You're waiting for the fruit to appear on it or whatever, and it just feels really, really good. So I like that one a lot. Psalm 19, I think I just did a portion of. By the way, this is coming from the English Standard Version, ESV. So if you're wondering, where's he getting this one? So, it'll sound maybe a little different than what you grew up or heard about. So where's Psalm 19? Okay, that's Jason.
The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words, whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world.
Do you feel that way? The skies are getting awfully light polluted in this area, but do you have a chance ever to get out to the desert or someplace and really look up and see the stars and how magnificent that is? Yeah, the heavens declare God. So there's natural revelation, whether it's looking at the human body and how it works, or in this case, looking out at the stars in the sky. The universe screams out that there's a God. You have to shut your ears pretty hard not to hear that there's a God out there. Okay, then we've got what would you say, the less happy part. We've got Solomon kind of burned out, but honest to goodness, of all the literary inspirations, probably throughout the whole Bible, it would be Genesis and Ecclesiastes, where a lot of modern authors go. So we'll come back to that idea in just a second, but I just wanted you to hear part of Ecclesiastes 1. So, what's the name again? I'm sorry. Katie. So Katie's got that.
Ecclesiastes 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, "See, this is new"? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after.
Can you see why a lot of modern authors love Ecclesiastes? Because it's hopeless. I can't tell you how many times I've had students reading Hemingway or Steinbeck or whatever from the 20th century. They say, "Why are these people so miserable?" And I say, "Because they got no hope. They've given up on the." I don't try to tell them where I fit into the thing, but I say they've just given up on the idea of God. They went through World War I, and that just destroyed all the idea of progress, and we're getting better and better as a human race, and they saw the devastation, especially Hemingway. And so they went to Ecclesiastes, and they said, "He's got it." And that's how they felt. I mean, do you hear that circular pattern? You know, the sun rises, the sun sets, the ocean just keeps doing its thing, the waters flow by, and nothing changes. There's nothing new. It's all been done before. Ho-hum. Like a country western song. Okay, one more, and then we'll get a little bit happier tune here. But here's Michael doing.
For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace.
And if anybody was around in the 60s and you hummed anything from the Birds on that one, to everything, turn. Okay, that's just me. So I think of that song going at that. We'll do two from Isaiah, and then we'll be done with this. Somebody has Isaiah 40. Okay, you got Isaiah 40. Sorry, Alan.
Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert the highway for your God. Every valley shall be lifted up, every mountain and hill will be made low, and uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all the flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken.
I thought Handel wrote that.
Okay, once again, do you have the song going in your head on that one? We're coming to that season. I'm so glad because I love to hear portions of Handel's Messiah. You know what's interesting? Well, okay, I'm going to save it. We'll talk about Handel in a minute. But this came right after all of the woes and the first part of Isaiah, and then we got Sennacherib and then the saving of Jerusalem at that time. And then it's like he shifts gears, Isaiah does, and now it's saying let's take Israel, which has been scattered and all. Let's give them good news. There's good things coming to them, and so you get things like this. It sounds like it's talking about John the Baptist, and then we'll end on. For one more, Isaiah 53. Not all of Isaiah 53, but there's a good portion of it here. Larry's got that.
Isaiah 53. Who has believed what he has heard from us, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a young plant, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all.
Isn't that powerful? Some people call Isaiah the fifth gospel because there's so much that you can go back to, and the early church went back to. And I asked a guy who's part of Jews for Jesus if this is true, because I had heard that in many Jewish services, they don't read Isaiah 53 because it confuses their people because it sounds like it's Jesus. And I've heard that there have been some street evangelists in Israel that will read that to a Jew and say, who's this about? And they go, that's Jesus, and then they want to walk away and say, it's from your own scriptures. And a lot of them don't know that because they haven't been given that opportunity to hear what's in the Bible about their own Messiah. So anyway, I hope you get the feeling for the beauty of the language. These are considered great poems no matter where. And so if you want to talk to people about the value of the Bible, you say, hey, it's got great stories, but it's got some great poetry too. I wanted to show you something. This is outside of the United Nations, and they took a portion of Isaiah that says, when the good times come, the forward-looking things, when Messiah comes to the earth, that people will take their swords and beat them into plowshares. And so I don't know if you can see very well here, but this is a sword, and then it's being turned into a plow down there. So that's for the United Nations. Maybe that shows up a little bit better there. Because that's the dream, that's the hope of all mankind, isn't it? But it's only going to happen in a certain context, and it's certainly not going to happen because of the United Nations. But at least that was a nice vision there to say, we got to get rid of war. Well, someday we will. What other things are in the Bible? I won't spend a lot of time on this, but aren't there some wonderful parables that Jesus told? I'll tell you why I like parables. Parables are like somebody's walking along and then they stand someplace and then a trap door opens. Maybe it's just the bizarreness of me or something, but I think that's so cool that people would talk to Jesus and they would nod and they'd be with him on the story, and all of a sudden, and it was like he'd get them every time on these parables. I'll just give you a couple of examples. So remember, is the Samaritan the first guy to go past that beaten, ruined person? He's not the first one. Who goes first? The guys that the Jews who are hearing the story would say, yeah, those are our boys. And then they don't help that guy, and they go, well, who's left? And Jesus says, then came a Samaritan. They don't like Samaritans. I mean, can you imagine just, what do you mean a good Samaritan? There's no such thing. And so that story has a real drop to it there, right toward the end. Well, this nice guy passes, and one of your heroes, he didn't do anything. But the Samaritan, oh, wow. How about the prodigal son? We're okay with that story about, God running out and grabbing this guy. And then the Jews listening to the story are going to get upset toward the end. Why? Because that's a beautiful story. The dad comes out and gives the kid a hug. It seems like it ought to end right there, but it doesn't end there. What's the trap door for that one? The older son, he's a jerk. And if the Jews are really listening closely, they're the older son. I don't know how many of them got that, but they might have said, hey, wait a minute, a little bit later. That's a great story. No, it isn't. That's us. So the trap door again. I'll skip over a lot of these, but so many of them have that nice quality to them. How about history? There's history in the Bible. If people want to learn something about history, the Bible's full of history. Remember we talked about these place names and also many of them pop up in the stories. How about letters? Everybody likes to snoop and read somebody else's mail. You got all these letters in there. You're hearing one side of a story, but all of Paul's letters, we talked about some of them go to churches, some of them go to individuals. But Paul's always trying to deal with some issue, and if you know what the issue is, it gets pretty interesting. And then you got other writers of letters as well. How about tragedies? Everybody thinks, well, I'll go to college and I'll learn about tragedies, famous tragedies. Oedipus. You heard of Oedipus? Jim's going. There's an old joke. Mommy, what's an Oedipus complex? Shut up and kiss me. I'll wait. Okay, never mind. But yeah, but a tragedy is somebody who's real high in society, and you look up to them as the quintessential what a person ought to be. And then they've got something inside them that's a weakness, some kind of weakness, and that weakness leads to a crash, a fall. And Aristotle thought about this a lot, and he said, why do people keep going to tragedies? And he said, it's for two things. They're going to have pity and they're going to have fear. The pity is, man, I feel bad that guy dropped. What do you think their fear would be? The what?
Could be them.
It could be them. If the best of us, what's to prevent me from going down the trap door like that? And so there's a term for it. Maybe you've heard that used in society called catharsis. That was Aristotle's idea, that somehow you watch that stuff and you go through those feelings of fear and pity and you end up feeling better afterwards. You've kind of worked those emotions out inside of you. So if people have a catharsis, they've gone through some kind of emotional deal and they're better at the end of it. So he says that's one of the reasons people like tragedies. Well, yeah, there are actually tragedies in the Bible. What about Saul? Did he have great potential? Yeah, strapping, nice guys from a good tribe. And what's his problem? Why doesn't he make it as the first king?
Ego.
Or I think it's a lack of ego, because he never trusts himself. The guys tell him, hey, don't do that. Or Samuel will say, don't do something. And the guys in his army will say, go ahead. And he never makes a stand for God. And he'll say, oh, because Samuel will say, do not let this king live after the battle. And he lets the king live. Destroy all of the livestock. And then Samuel comes on after the battle. He says, what do I hear? Bah, bah. And Saul's going, yeah. And so Saul gives in, and he makes some stupid comments, and his son says, why are you doing that stuff? And so the whole thing feels really sad. And by the end of the story, where is he? He's on a battlefield. He's already been told by the ghost of Samuel that you're going to die tomorrow. But he goes out with a sword in hand, doesn't he? He doesn't just run for the hills. You got to admire him because he hangs in there. He goes out, though, and he's ruined. His army's ruined. He's ruined. His son's ruined. But he had that wonderful position, and he crashes. I think the story of Samson is like that, too, don't you? High position. He was one of the judges of Israel. But he let it all get away from him. But then there's the other type of story. So here's the story of the crash and drop. Somebody mentioned did you mention Ruth? Oh, okay, Larry did. So the story of Ruth is the opposite. It's a comedy, and it's not like laugh out loud or slap your knee kind of comedy. I mean, after all, Dante talked about the divine comedy. There's not a lot of one-liners in divine comedy. But the idea was that you start off with something bad, and you come out of it, and everything ends up okay at the end. Most sitcoms are like that, aren't they? Or most dramas on television, somebody is in trouble, and they come out at the end. It's really, really popular. So technically, that's a form of a comedy. So you take the book of Ruth, and what's going on there? Well, she's the daughter-in-law to Naomi, and Naomi has left Israel and living as a Moabite, living in the land of Moab. Now the husbands start dying off. So the husbands die. Now what are you going to do? Well, there's no place to live there. And Naomi says, I'm going to go back to Israel. And so she goes back, and Ruth says, I'm going with you. That was kind of neat. She didn't have to. She might say, well, that's because you're Jewish. I'm a Moabite. I'll stay here. Thanks. There's a really neat part there. It says, your God will be my God, And I'm old enough now, I can remember they used to sing that at weddings. That was a wedding song, which is kind of funny because it has nothing to do with men and women. It's two women. It's, one's singing that to the other one, I guess. So she goes back to the land, and do things go well for her immediately? Hard labor. She's working on the outskirts of some of the land and all. But does it end up okay? Yeah, you bet. What's the big deal about Ruth and Boaz marrying? What's that baby end up? It's what? Yeah, but I mean, now they get together and they have this child. That child is part of a line that's going to be really important. Yeah, it's David's line. And so it's like, oh, wow. So it ties into the whole thing about David. So a neat story there. Okay, I won't spend much time on this because I know we talked about it before and we were looking at Proverbs, but there's so much good worldly wisdom in there. Don't withhold good from those who deserve it when it's in your power to act. I don't hear anything about God in there or about sin or salvation. Just be a good person. If you have a chance to do it, do it. The evil deeds of a wicked man ensnare him. The cords of his sin hold him fast. We know people like that. One step into sin, second step, and then, it's like a quicksand, and it takes them over. We see that. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It stores its provisions in the summer and gather its food at harvest. Does that sound familiar? The ant and the grasshopper. Remember the Aesop fable? There it is again. Again, nothing about God and sermons. These are not sermons. These are just general ways that you can get through life. Reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. That's always been a challenge to me. I always want to watch what I say because it's so easy to make a critical comment. And I forgot what the statistics are, but it's like one critical comment. It takes lots of positives to make up for that one slice that you gave to somebody. But the tongue of the wise brings healing. I'd like to think I do that once in a while, not as much as I could. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Again, this doesn't have to do with theology, does it? A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Mark Twain said something like that. He said, a friend will be on your side when you're wrong because everybody's on your side when you're right. So kind of like that. A friend loves at all times. It's nice to have somebody like that in your life. The literary inspirations, I mentioned that before. Herman Melville starts off saying, call me Ishmael. Well, in today's society, people go, okay, so we got a main character named Ishmael. Got it. Yeah, but he's writing in the 1800s to people that knew the Bible. So from the very first sentence, just 3 words long, call me Ishmael, what do you already know? If you know the Bible, it's going to make that story so much richer. What can you guess he must be like if it's making a reference here to the Ishmael in the Bible? Trace?
Outcast.
Yeah.
Because Ishmael was Hagar's son, and the reason that Sarah sent Hagar away.
Yeah. He's the wanderer and becomes the forerunner of the Arabs. And so you're meeting a character that obviously is not interconnected with society very well. But you and I, as Christians, we would know that story. But, I pity these modern people that read it and go, okay, so you're Ishmael. They don't make that connection. They don't get those rich extra pictures that you will all get because you've read that story. Ernest Hemingway, I forgot who, somebody read the first chapter of Ecclesiastes. In the older version, I think King James, it says the sun also rises. So he takes that as his story. So if you knew that was the title, do you think you're going to have a happy story? It's from Ecclesiastes 1 that says, I'm burned out. Everything is the same. Nothing new and ho-hum. And so you read the sun also rises. There's a bunch of expatriates over in Europe after World War I, and they are burned out. One guy gets hurt in the war, and the rest of them just carouse and drink and fight. And at the end of the story, they've learned nothing. They're no better. And it's a really grim story. This is a collection of these stories, but you can expect that from the title because you know Ecclesiastes. John Steinbeck has a story called East of Eden. Why did he pick that particular direction? Why not north of Eden?
Transgressions as far as the east is from the west, or?
Yeah, well, what direct? Yeah, what were you going to say, Mike?
Adam and Eve were driven out of Eden to the east?
Yeah, they were driven out to the east, and then they're not allowed back in. So it's the loss of paradise, basically. So this is not going to be a happy story either. That's the ending of things that could have been good and something bad that comes along. Dante has something called the Divine Comedy. If you look at the whole story of Dante, it's heaven and hell. And it's a whole bunch of stuff. Now, you may not buy into the theology, but it'd be good, if you knew something about the New Testament, because he's basing a lot of it on that. Shakespeare, somebody estimated one time over 1,000 references to the Bible. C.S. Lewis, of course. Flannery O'Connor. Anybody read Flannery O'Connor? Really? Okay, you guys read Flannery O'Connor? Kind of disturbing stories, aren't they? But she was a Roman Catholic in the South, lived in the 50s and 60s, and she wrote stories that are very Christian-oriented, but they're not like obvious Christian stories about it. And at the end, they got down on their knees and prayed to God. But they're Christian elements that are going in there. Really, really interesting stories. You might, I don't know if you'd enjoy them. It's not the right word, but they're interesting anyway. Hawthorne, he was steeped in that puritanical, life. I think one of his ancestors was involved in the Salem witch trials. So a lot of his stories involve this Puritan thing, big time. Emily Dickinson, I want to share a short poem with you on that. And Lord Byron, I think because of time, I'm not going to do the Byron, but this is the quick poem. Okay, so see what you think. See if you can pick up. These are called allusions. She's going to make a reference to Bible stories here. Belshazzar had a letter. He never had but one. Belshazzar's correspondent concluded and begun in that immortal copy, the conscience of us all can read without its glasses on Revelation's wall. Okay, again, modern readers are just going to say, I don't get it. In fact, the other day I looked this one up just to see what people said, and then people were posting, help, I got to analyze this poem. I don't get it. What's going on? And so a couple people said, look in the Bible. Anybody know what book of the Bible Belshazzar shows up in? Daniel. Okay, the writing on the wall happened for him, didn't it? He's got all these goblets and things from the temple, and he's kind of showing off, and they're having this big party. He's bringing out all these sacred things that were part of the Jewish temple. And then strange writing appears on the wall. And he doesn't get us. They bring Daniel in. Daniel basically says, adios, this is the end. I always thought that was a weird ending, too, because Belshazzar says, thanks. I mean, I would have killed Daniel, wouldn't you? Say, don't tell me that kind of stuff, or let's run for it. But he honors Daniel for it, and that night in came the Medes and the Persians, and out went Belshazzar. So anyway, did Belshazzar get a letter? Yeah, he did. And he said, and then it says, the conscience of us all can read our letters. So what's going on? We're getting letters all the time, but ours are not as vibrant and as powerful as that. We're getting conscience letters all the time. God's telling us we could suppress it, but it's there. It's inside of us. And we go, I shouldn't have done that. I should do that. But it's pretty powerful, isn't it, for just those few lines, if you knew the original story. Okay, I'm going to skip over this one, but anybody know anything about Lord Byron, one of the Romantic poets in the 1800s? British guy. Really a wild guy. I mean, he was really strange. He'd be like a rock star today. You'd just read to say, what in the world is he up to? But he's got a poem. Here's the first stanza. This is the only part I'll read. It's the same thing that Jason was talking about, where the Assyrians come and they've surrounded Jerusalem. They're going to take the city, they think. So here's his poem starting. The Assyrian came down like the wolf on the fold, and his cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold. And the sheen of their spears was like stars on the sea when the blue waves roll nightly on deep Galilee. So he set the scene. It's really a powerful poem. It's not that long. If you just look up the destruction of Sennacherib, or just do Sennacherib, and you get close on the spelling, but just do Sennacherib Byron, and you'll find it. How about artistic? So there's some of the poetry things. How about artistic inspirations? You can see, I think, over here, that's Da Vinci. And, of course, we got tons of Da Vinci stuff going on with Dan Brown. Now, this is the Moses, picture of Moses. I say picture of the statue. Anybody know who did that one? Yeah, it's Michelangelo. He did a lot of it. He did the famous David, but for several reasons, I didn't bring that one in. So, think about music. I had you read that one about Isaiah 40, about the glory of the Lord and all that stuff. Okay, well, if we'd had time, I was going to play some of that, but we don't. So we'll skip that. How about modern musicians? This is just a partial list. Even if they, notice most of these are probably not believers, but they thought there was something so powerful or said so well that they brought it in there. For example, Leonard Cohen wrote the song Hallelujah that's in Shrek. I mean, the first time I saw Shrek, I'm going, they're talking about David. They're talking, New Old Testament stuff. Now, it's not real positive. It's a pretty downer kind of song, but it's just interesting how they'll pull things out that they think still resonates with a lot of people. Metallica? Yeah, there's a good Christian group, huh? Mumford & Sons, their second album was called Babel. So, I mean, they're using that. Apparently, Mumford, I think, is there a real Mumford? Is that his name? Anyway, the lead guy, his dad, I think, was a minister or something.
Alice Cooper is a Christian.
Yeah, Alice Cooper's become a Christian.
What about Led Zeppelin's Stereo Heaven?
I don't know. I didn't find that one, but I don't know the lyrics to that. So.
Although, given the fact that you have Stairway to Heaven and Highway to Hell, kind of tells you about the distribution and traffic.
Yeah. Have you thought about the language and how much we owe? I'm just going to skim through these just because of time. These originally came from the Bible. A few more. They made a movie. Anybody see Chariots of Fire? Okay. They have songs about Chariots of Fire. The still small voice, rod of iron, out of the mouth of babes, valley of the shadow of death, inherit the wind. They made a famous play out of that. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, already mentioned that. The handwriting's on the wall, oh no. That gets used in a lot of situations. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Quick pop quiz, who said that? Lincoln did. It's called the House Divided speech. So how many times did Lincoln go back and pull things out of the Bible? A lot of times. American presidents often do that. Pearl of great price. The blind leading the blind. The spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak. He who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. How about individual words? Again, if you don't mind, I'm just going to hurtle past these. Heaven and hell, and just to give you an idea of some of the words that and these are not all. I just picked out some I thought you'd find interesting. I am going to stop at one because it cracks me up. The word Philistine. You look it up in a dictionary today, and it means somebody who's not very cultured. Oh, real Philistine over there. Okay, so it's an insult. All right, but if you read the Old Testament, who are the Philistines? The Philistines are down on the sea coastline. They have the culture, and the Jews are sitting up, in tents and kind of scratching themselves and all. And if they need weapons fixed or they got to go do something, they got to go down to where the civilization is. That's where the Walmarts were. You didn't have anything there. And so they're going down there. And so it's been completely reversed, and I don't know why it happened or how it happened. Now it's an insult. Back then, you'd say, ooh, the Philistines. They got good, sharp stuff, let's go down and get stuff. Yeah, they had chariots, all that kind of stuff. Jews didn't have that. And then, of course, notice how many came from the word crux, the crux of the situation, or the word crucial. How about even phrases? Martin Luther King, let justice. Now, by the way, most people say Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but he's Reverend, isn't he? I mean, the guy's got this background. If you look at that famous I Have a Dream speech, I mean, so much of his language is very Old Testament style language. I didn't finish it, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Famous saying from Psalms, weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. Kennedy and Reagan and others have used that idea of a city on the hill. John Winthrop, the guy that came over here as part of the first Puritan group, he gave a speech before they landed, and he said, we want to be that shining city on the hill. And it's all coming from Matthew. So it's been done over and over again because it's got kind of a visual power to it. And then I mentioned the last thing would be the Cornerstone book, and John already touched on that. Just it emphasizes the value of the individual. The women actually are elevated in the New Testament. I was talking about that Sunday to a class. We don't have time today, but a lot of misconceptions about the Bible and women. Women were elevated because of the New Testament, not degraded. the freedoms we have, development of science, education, civil rights. Think about how often the civil rights movement talked about going to the promised land. That's what King said. He said, I've seen the land. I don't know if I'm going to get there. Well, why? Because he's not egotistical saying I'm Moses, but he's using that language and that imagery of Moses seeing the land and the people going there. And they were the children of Israel, in a sense, being led out of slavery on the way to their freedom. Economics, laws, morality, so much. And then I'll end on this, that they did a study one time. They talked to 41 teachers. These are not Christian teachers. This is not at a Christian school. And they said, knowledge of the Bible is crucial for a good education, provides an educational advantage. I think that's good language that you can use when you're talking to somebody. Hey, for your kids, you're talking to an adult, hey, for your kids, you want to provide an educational advantage? Who doesn't? Then have them read the Bible. Chairs at secular schools, again, not Christian schools, said the Bible is the key book for high school students to know. Isn't that interesting? They didn't say Shakespeare. They didn't say all these others. They said the one book that they would pick, the best book for a kid to succeed in college, was the Bible. Here's a good conclusion. William James, a famous philosopher. In fact, he's called the father of American psychology. Pretty well-known guy back in the 1800s. He said, the Bible contains more exquisite beauty, more morality, more important history, and finer strains of poetry and eloquence than all other books. Again, not because he was a preacher. He wasn't a preacher. He was a secular guy. But he says, go to the Bible if you want to gain some appreciation for these things we've been talking about tonight. Reed Buckley, William Buckley's brother, he was a speech teacher for years. He said, if someone doesn't read the Bible, this person is irreparably ignorant and culturally deprived. Ouch. Ouch. Don't say that to somebody, but I mean, you can say, well, you know what Buckley says, or you point to Buckley. Okay, I gave you a list of resources. One time I had a sabbatical, and so I put together a bunch of talks on different parts of the Bible, and you can give people that kind of stuff because it's non-threatening. There's no altar calls and this kind of thing. It's just a secular view of the Bible, but the value of the Bible. So I just take people through different portions of the Bible. And then the other thing, I brought it with me. Well, it's somewhere. But it's a 2-page handout. I probably told you about it before. I just call it Best of the Best. So if you got somebody kind of fired up and they're saying, I'm willing to try it, but I get bogged down in Leviticus. Yeah, who doesn't? So you say, well, here, and it's a 2-page handout, and it follows the story of the Bible, and it says what chapters might be good if you want to follow that story. So it does maybe about a fourth of the Bible. Does a bunch of chapters in Genesis because the great stories are there. Does the Exodus story, obviously, and then skips around a little bit, and then it ends up in Revelation. But just a few chapters, so somebody can read that. And they're not going to be bored. They're not going to get bogged down on Levitical laws and stuff like that. I'm not saying those are bad, but I'm just saying if you want somebody to get through the New Testament and the Old Testament, one gospel, they ought to read, I think, Luke, because Luke is the outsider talking about Jesus. The others are Jews talking about Jesus. But anyway, so email me. I'll be glad to send that to you. Whew. Okay, that was a lot. I gave you a lot there. Sorry. We usually do Q&A, but I'll stick around if you have particular questions. So next week, I'm going to be at Life Point. Steve's coming back here. And I forgot what he's going to do. Has he told you? I don't remember. Okay, yeah. So he's going to finish up the part of the Bible. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. Again, the book's here if you'd like to pick up the book. I'll go ahead and close. Father, I thank you so much for this evening. Thank you for people being attentive, kind of running a lot of material here. But I thank you for the power of the Bible. If we can just put people, sit them down with the Bible, the power comes out. It'll be there. And you can reach them in ways that we can't reach them. So we pray that we can stir up some interest in people to have them at least consider the Bible. And I pray that you bless people for the rest of this week and ask in your Son's name. Amen.